Hey, welcome to the second episode of Joyfully Imperfect podcast for highly driven women. Today, we're going to talk about a topic not many people touch on, even though it's extremely relevant for all women. It's our menstrual cycle and how it impacts our productivity. Now, for the sake of this discussion, I'm going to talk about the menstrual cycle and use the word period, which is what I learned when I was a kid because nobody talked about menstrual cycles openly because it was something to be shameful about, which is kind of sad because the truth of it is that the menstrual cycle is something that impacts almost all women, at least until they hit menopause. And even then, it has an impact on their life. So, having said that, let's talk about it today without shame, without harassment, and think of our period as a friend that comes every month to help us out and teach us about ourselves. What a foreign idea. What a foreign concept. It's being dwelled more and more by other women coaches and women leaders and in women's health now. But for the longest time, we have treated our period as something to be pushed away, shoved away. Our feelings around our periods are what we call the PMS to be something to be shameful about or to be upset about or something that men often make fun of. Maybe you've been in that place and space at your workplace. I have. I won't lie. But the truth is that your menstrual cycle or period, as I will continue to refer to in this podcast, is usually a monthly occurrence. Most of us have it within 28 to 31 days. Some people have irregular periods, but the cycle of your body still applies if you pay attention to it. Okay. So I'm inviting you to do that now, to actually pay attention to how your body behaves, even if you don't end up bleeding every 28 to 31 days. Now, notice it's actually equivalent to a lunar cycle. 28 days is about the moon cycle from the new moon to new moon. And that is what your body follows. So a woman's body follows a lunar cycle. First thing I want you to take away, a woman's body follows a lunar cycle. A man's usually follows the solar cycle, which is a daily cycle where you wake up as the sun rises and you go through your workday. And as the sun sets, your body gets ready to rest. Now, our society, of course, is conditioned to work on a daily cycle. You wake up, you work through the day, and you rest at night. Whereas a woman's body is really adapted to working on a lunar cycle. And I'll share more about it as we go forth. And this really excites me because this actually impacts our productivity and we don't even know about it and we don't even give ourselves grace for it. Right? Especially if you're somebody who's very driven and highly productive, wants to get a lot done, which is actually most women in our society today are in that position where they are wearing multiple hats. They are in their workplace. They are moms, and even as moms, they're the cooks and the drivers, and they're getting a lot done. If you're an entrepreneur, you're running your business and running your home. There's just so many different hats that we wear that we don't ever give ourselves permission to rest. And guess what? Your period is actually the time for you to rest. So your cycle, your entire cycle is built for a woman's body. It's built for a woman's body. And it's also how we get to show up in the world. So your hormones, and as they fluctuate, are not just a physical thing. They actually impact your emotions, they impact your moods, they impact your productivity, they impact your physical energy. And that's how our bodies are meant to run. First, get that. First, just get that a woman's body is meant to run by the lunar cycle, 28 days. I'm just using that. I'm sure it's not exactly that for you, but just for the sake of this discussion, 28 days. It's not meant to work on a daily cycle. Yes, the daily cycle does impact you, but the way our workplace is set up, the way we set up our work day is based on a daily cycle, but a woman's cycle is meant to be lunar. So, having said that, how does the menstrual cycle impact your productivity and impact you? Let's start with when you first get your period. Okay. That is your body going through a release phase, as I say it, as I call it for simplicity. Yes, there are scientific terms, but I'm not going to go into that, frankly, because I'm not an expert. I'm not a doctor, and I may get them wrong. And I'll get an expert in one of these days to actually talk about hormones and exactly what cycle is what, and we'll address that. But for now, let's talk about starting your cycle when you first get your period. When you first get your period, your body is releasing. It's releasing, it's letting go. So that is a time for you to rest. And how many of you actually get an opportunity to rest? Not many of you, I'm sure. And you probably drive yourself through that, push through those tasks and get it done. When all your body is really asking is for you to rest. Now, before you actually have your period, you go through a cycle, a phase when it starts to get into that position where your body starts to get tired a little more. You get more emotional. That means your feelings are more on the surface, which also we talk as being wrong, but it really isn't. It's actually a great time to process emotions that you have suppressed and not allowed so far. So it's actually an invitation by your body, by your emotions, with your feelings to actually go in, go within, so you can process your emotions and allow your intuition to come and vibrate stronger. How about that? So, from a productivity point of view, this is a time for you to slow down. Time for you to slow down so you can rest, relax, and regenerate. Now, in ancient cultures, this was actually a time a woman was given time to slow down. We were, in fact, talking about it just in the previous podcast we recorded earlier today with my friends, Laura and Beth. We have a podcast called Be Friend. And in that, we actually talked about the fact that in Cherokee culture, women were during the time of the period, or when they were having the period or the bleeding, they would go separately. They would go to a separate space to rest and rejuvenate and go within, so they could create a new, not just for themselves, but also for everybody in the community. So that, and they were well respected, wasn't considered shameful. It was to give them space, and they were well taken care of. Somebody would go and serve food and just leave it at at their doorstep, so as not to disturb their process and allow them to go within and intuit. In Indian culture, also in ancient times, this was a time when a woman was taken care of, even given time to rest. Okay. And there weren't sanitary pads available, so it wasn't easy for them to move around as openly as well. But now what has happened in the modern culture is because it's actually something that you're shamed for. Firstly, in the Indian culture, women don't go to temples anymore during that time. Not because they can't, because now they are much more mobile than they were in the ancient times, but because for some reason that time of rest translate into the time of being not clean. So it's become almost like the cycle has become something to be shameful of. But guess what? If you don't bleed and renew, you can't rebirth, literally and also figuratively in your life. So this is a very important period for you to slow off, to rest, to rejuvenate, so you can rebirth. It's like a new cycle starting. as you go through this period. Literally go through this period. So I invite you to think about it. But not only are you shamed, as in literally by, oh, you can't go to the temple or be part of the prayers, etc., but even there is this underlying thing of shame, like, oh, you're PMSing, that's why you're emotional, or you're not allowed to rest during that time at all. Because in this world of high productivity and constant doing, how can you actually rest for a period of almost a week where you're going through getting ready for your period and then going through the 5 or sometimes for women 7 days, up to 8 days of having your period? And maybe it is not possible for you to rest throughout, but there are a few days you require rest because your body demands it. Your mind demands it. Your emotions demand it. The reason they're demanding it is because that is the time you can actually go within and get ideas and get insights, which will help you through the rest of the month and make you more productive. So I invite you to see how you can incorporate this in your life. For me, for example, it's easier. Uh, like I said, I'm perimenopausal at this point. So I had my cycle after 2.5 months this time. But I actually noticed and paid attention that I got all the symptoms no matter what, in the sense that I needed to rest more every month, even though I did not bleed. I needed to process more emotions during that time. And my cycle this time coincided with the full moon, which we'll talk about more in a little bit as well. And full moon is a time of completion. So this was my time to complete things and close down stuff, as in reach closure and let go and release. So what is it that your period, your cycle is inviting you to do when you are going through that end of cycle or you're bleeding or the beginning of cycle? I actually think that's the beginning of your cycle because, and that's how they see it. The first day of your period is the first day of your cycle. So that is the time to rejuvenate and reset and intuit. And then as you come out of this cycle, your energy is the highest. Notice, pay attention. For most of us, as we come out of this cycle, your energy is the highest. The key, though, is first, during that cycle, the first begin during your period to actually allow yourself space to rest and rejuvenate and ask for help and go within. And that is what helps you with the increased energy and go in full force after that. What a thought. What an idea. Maybe you've heard about it before, but how many of you practice it? I did this week. Well, my body didn't really give me permission to do anything else. In fact, I am still in the period of rest, and I'm sharing with you what my intuition is guiding me to right now. Because what impacts me impacts other women, and that's what I get to share. So, from a perfect productivity point of view, you would never rest, you would keep going. But really, this is the time you rest. And as you come out of this time, you're most productive and you are generating ideas. This is the time you're really generating ideas. I will actually leave you some resources that I have online about that. This is the time you're generating ideas. And you're able, as you finish your period, you're able to get more done. So that is the time you're most productive because you've rested and rejuvenated and you are intuiting better, your imagination is sharper, you're getting more ideas and you can put those into work. Now, this is of course affected by your hormones physically, etc. And I'm not going into that, but that it has an effect on that because during this time, your estrogen is now climbing up and that impacts that. Then you hit your ovulation somewhere in the middle of your cycle. And that's another point kind of like where your body starts resetting because now it's getting ready to create, right? It's getting ready to create. There's ovulation, there's a seed being born. So now you're creating. So in the second half, the first half of your second half of your cycle, maybe 2 weeks into your cycle, starting from the first day of your period, you start ovulating, which means you start generating, your seed is being created. It's the period of creation. It's the period of creation. You're calmer, your emotions are calmer, and you are able to create. And as you go forward towards the second half of the last week of your cycle, again, your body starts to slow down. It gets ready for rest and rejuvenation. So in fact, if you actually followed the cycle, you would use the first week of your cycle to rest, rejuvenate, intuit, come up with ideas from within, and then actually start creating them in the world and getting it set up in the second week. And the third week, you would actually create. And the fourth week, you will start actually, again, closing down and completing tasks and closing tasks, and then getting into the period of rest again. And guess what? If you actually followed the cycle, you would be more productive, you would be a happier person and find more joy in your life. That's why I'm sharing it here with you. So I'm inviting you to think about it a little bit and see where your cycle is. And now, if you're a menopausal or a perimenopausal woman, or a woman who just has irregular cycles, I still invite you to think about it, because really our body follows the lunar cycle. That's what a woman's body does, even if you don't have the bleeding. Pay attention. Maybe it's aligned with the full moon and the new moon. This time, like I said, my period was aligned with the full moon. And what happens during the full moon is a time of letting go and release. Think about it. The full moon is when the moon's at its peak, and now it's going to wane into the new moon. So now it's already reached its peak, and you're letting go and releasing so that you can create anew with the new moon. So if if your energy peaks at the new moon, that is the time to create new. If you start your cycle at the full moon, that is the time to let go and release. So pay attention. Even if you don't bleed, you may be aligning with the moon cycle at some point with your physical body. So I invite you to do that and pay attention to that. Like I said, even though I did not have my period for the last 2.5 months, I could still see when there were periods I needed to rest. During that, for me, it's usually 3 to 4 days. And then my energy starts going up and my energy peaks, and then it starts dipping down until I come to a period of rest again. And each one of those cycles, each one of those almost like a week period, has a different energy to it. Just to summarize, the first week is about, it basically starts from, for me at least, it starts from a couple days before the period to when the period ends. It's like, coming into rest, going within, really seeing emotions and feelings come up, sitting with it so I can come through on the other side. For me, this time, there was a lot of sadness, hopelessness, almost like letting go during my first couple of days of period. And as I sat with the feeling, it became more of like letting go. Now, the key was I sat with those feelings. I did not ignore them. I did not dismiss them. I did not push them away. I did not suppress them. Neither did I necessarily express them loudly, because I was in a space where I didn't need to. And sometimes you do need to, because these feelings are coming up, maybe because you're not setting boundaries, or you just need rest and you're not giving yourself permission to. So I sat with it and I gave myself permission to rest. I let my family know as much. And I have a very supportive partner, my husband, who understands this, because we've had conversations about it. And I gave myself a complete day of rest yesterday. My body just didn't allow it. I canceled appointments. I gave myself space to do it. And it isn't always easy to do that. I get that. It isn't always easy for me either, but I gave myself permission to do it. And as I sat and I got up this morning, having gone through and processed a lot of those emotions I just talked about, the sadness and the feeling a little hopeless, like what's the point kind of running around constantly. I came into this space, which was a much more contemplative, easy, and flow space of just being okay with, yeah, running around and constantly pushing and efforting is pointless. So when we allow and receive, things just happen more seamlessly. And that is the state of flow that we all want and desire. And your period gives you an invitation to come into that state and stay in that state after your period is over and then come into rest. So, yes, your menstrual cycle is actually your productivity cycle. So, I invite you to stop pushing through the time when your body and your mind and your emotions and your feelings and your spirit is inviting you to rest. And instead, rest so you're ready and renewed for the next phase of the cycle. Thank you for listening. If you wish to work with me, I mentor highly productive, highly driven women to create joy in their life without sacrificing themselves or their work or their families, most importantly. So, if you wish to work with me, please check out all the resources mentioned in the introduction and in the show notes below. You can reach out to me through my website, my Instagram, or my Facebook page. All right. Thank you for listening. I'll be back in next week with a new episode. Bye.